Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel JI Colors. My name is Jody and today I am going to take you along as I experiment for the first time ever in this Korean watercolor and color pencil coloring book. It is a brand new book, like I mentioned, and I did show it in my foreign coloring books as one of the books that I wanted to get into. It is by Starland. And it is called Emotional Illustration Coloring Book. I did get it off of Etsy. And what I thought I would do is I have a ton of different watercolor mediums, and I wanted to do some of the warm-up and testing on some of these front pages here that have some testing areas. So just because of the way my camera is set up, I'm actually going to work on this side of the page. So we'll just start here, and I will probably underneath each of these areas, I will write down the item, the medium that I'm using. But I do want to give a bunch of them different tests and see how they work. And so I thought I would bring you along with me as I try that. All right, let me lower the camera a little bit and pull out my first set of watercolor mediums. So as you're probably aware, if you follow my channel, I have a ton of watercolor based markers in different medium, and that's because I work in mainly two-sided books, and I'm not great with alcohol markers regardless. I prefer water-based pigments. So I'm going to start off with a viewer request, and that is to break out my Kuretake Zig Clean Color Real brush pens and try them out in some of these books. I'm going to slip a piece of clear paper behind here. I don't anticipate that there will be any bleed through, but since this is a brand new book to me, better be safe than sorry. I am going to just start off, and I'm also going to bring in a watercolor brush because I want to be able to see if I can move things as well as move them with the actual water-based markers. So let's just start. This is bright yellow, and it really is more of a orange color. I'm just gonna see if I can move this. It is allowing me to move it on the paper, so that's kind of good. Blend the two colors together. I'll leave some area blank there and see if I can mix the colors. Yeah. Also mix it with the actual pens. Yeah. Okay, and let's check. No bleed through. Okay, so that was the Zig, and I will just write that underneath. Zoomed you in a little bit more in case that wasn't clear enough. I apologize. Next, I'm going to try the Royal Talons Equaline brush pens, and I do have a review on the channel for these pens. They are unique in that they are refillable, and they also have a dual-sided nib. So this brush nib is actually if it for some reason has gotten squashed, you can flip it over. So it has a reversible nib. It is a brush on the other side as well. And see if I can wipe off the orange pigment. I would say that this is, yes, it's watercolor paper, but it is not heavily sized, so definitely you don't want to do a lot of scrubbing or a lot of wet on wet. So that's what can already tell. So I'll wait for that to dry before adding a few more layers. Let's see how it blends just with the markers. I think it probably blends better with just the markers than with the water. But it is pilling the paper a little bit right there. Okay, so that is the Equaline markers. Let's try some Korean markers. So these are the Korean Graphic Brush Marker Pro. They kind of have the free ink system that the acrylic markers are now coming out with. So this is my lightest color. So that seems to be mixing fine. One thing with these markers is you do have to be careful. If you have too many in your hand that are in similar colors, you need to make sure you get the right cap back on them. Okay, we'll let that dry. Okay, so these are Korean. Let's try our new Kuretake Zig brushables. They are also water-based. Okay, the next thing we're going to try are the Zig brushables, and these are a water-based marker, kind of like a Tombow, so not meant to be used with water, but they are water-based. They come in a two-tone per, so that's why you'll see me flipping them back and forth, because each end has a different color. I've now switched to the second pink, so I'm using two different ones, and I'm trying to blend them. They don't appear to be blending well together. There's a fairly strong pigment, so once it's down, it doesn't seem to want to move. Here I'm trying to move the pigment with the pen itself, and now I'm going to try and move the pigment with water. And as you can see, it's not really moving with water. It didn't move it on paper, the regular paper, nor does it seem to move it on this watercolor paper. I was able to add some to the wet area, but you can see the paper is pilling quite a bit once water has been added to it. Okay, we're moving on to Neocolor 2, which is a water-soluble crayon, and I'm going to use 4 different colors to do a gradient from yellow down to orange to almost a red, so a very deep orange. And I'm going directly onto the paper because I want to see how badly this paper is going to pill. Now that I've seen it starting to pill, I'm a little bit worried about how much water I can add to the paper. So I'm going to color directly onto the paper, doing a little bit blending here, and we'll see. Okay, we're activating it with a water brush here, starting from the lightest area and working my way down. It seems to be dissolving the pigment really well. I'm not scrubbing the paper. I am wetting it for sure though, and so far it's not pilling, so that is really encouraging. This is kind of what I was hoping, that the pigment would move a little bit easier. So happy with this. Okay, let's zoom out and look at how we are doing with this whole page. I would definitely say that I am not as proficient with the markers, and maybe it's just my skill set, but the Neocolor 2 has moved the best. Okay, the next medium we're going to try is Inktense, and I'm going to use a variety of purples, and I'm coloring directly onto the paper. Inktense pencils are ink, and so they generally move quite a bit on the paper. So I am coloring kind of sloppily, which is how I actually use them on real books. So now I'm going to activate them. You'll notice that there's quite a bit of paper showing, but the Inktense normally move a lot, so it should be able to fill in all of the tooth of the paper, and it seems to be doing that quite well. I'm not getting a lot of pilling so far. I am just wetting the paper though, and we'll see how that works. Now, if I'm going back and reworking the same areas, I am starting to see some pilling now, and that is one indication that while this is watercolor paper, it's not heavily sized, as I mentioned earlier. I do think that the colors still are vibrant though, and they are moving. I left some white of the paper there to show you that it is traveling, and I'll bring the darker purple down and mix it with the other purple. So you are able to move the pigment quite a bit more than we were with the markers, and that makes me happy. Looks like I forgot to do the handle, so let's apply some pigment directly onto the paper again. I'm going to start with the darker pigment on the bottom this time. Going to leave some space in between, and I want to see how well the water will just move the pigment itself. And yeah, we'll see how this works. It definitely is liquefying really well, so I'm not concerned that I need to pre-dissolve the pigment on a palette. I'm very happy with how the Neocolor 2 and the Inktense have worked on this paper so far. Okay, our next medium is going to be Derwent Graphitint. These are a water-soluble graphite pencil. They are a muted color. I like to use them in my mouse guard book. They kind of give a gritty feel. They move really well with water though. You can use them dry, but really once they are activated is when you see the muted color come out, and you will see that shortly after I add some water. And then after this we will try the Staedtler watercolor graphite pencils as well. Similar to Inktense, I just kind of put them on loosely with the water-soluble graphite pencil, and now I am activating it. The color does really come out once the water is added. I do wipe off my watercolor brush in between colors when I'm trying not to mix them, and then I will mix them together a little bit as well. So there are actually 3 different colors on this cup here, the third color being on the bottom. Because these activate so well, I'm not adding a lot of water, and they seem to be doing really well on this paper, and I will use them again in this book. All right, we are now getting to the Staedtler watercolor graphite pencils. There are 12 in this set. They work well with the graphitint, and I use them in combination. I'm using 2 different greens here, then a different, more of a burgundy color on the handle. Again, I just use them messily on my page. They dissolve well, and they travel well on the paper. Really happy with how they're turning out here. I definitely will be using the water graphite pencils in this book, because I think that they move really well, and they didn't require a lot of water to make them move like they are moving. Okay, for this next row, I am going to use actual watercolor mediums, and I'm going to start with my Viviva watercolor cork pan set. These are the swatch sheet for it on screen, and I'm just going to work directly with a water brush from the pan onto the page, and if it's too strong, then I will also maybe bring in a palette. But this is going on really nicely. Love the vivid colors, and it seems to be traveling well on the paper. Okay, let's add a bit of pigment to the glass on the bottom. I'm then going to do some mixing on the side palette of the cork area, and I'm going to add some yellow to this and then paint the rest of the glass. I want to see if the paint that I add mixes with the paint that's already there, because they are rather close and they are still damp. They don't seem to be mixing too much, which is good, but there is a bit of bleed through, as you will see as it dries a bit more. But happy with these paints, and I will use them again in this book. Okay, the next items I'm going to use are these Spectrum Noir Sparkle brush pens, and they paint just like a paintbrush, but they have a bit of sparkle to them, and I like to use them. And I typically use these in my coloring books and don't have any problems with bleed through, and usually also I have good luck with them, and they don't typically pill the paper. So I wanted to see how they would stand up to this paper here. Let's see if I can blend them a little bit. So if I put on a bunch of layers, then they do start to pill the paper, but if I'm just doing the single coat, which I would normally do, they seem to be doing okay. Oh, this one's a bright color. Whew. Let's see if I can blend that one out a bit. It does travel. So these are activating and moving, so that's nice. And you can shear them out quite a bit. So they are moving on the paper. So that's good to know. Yeah, they do seem to pill the paper once you start adding actual water to this paper. So, okay, I am also going to try some Paul Rubens watercolor. So this is the 48 set from Paul Rubens, and that's pretty. Let me see, water that down a bit. That's better. A little bit too concentrated there. But it's good to know that you can I'll do a little bit of wet on wet there and see what happens. Doesn't seem to travel a whole lot. Coax it a little bit. See if they running into each other. So it's definitely not an overly sized paper, but our coloring books are also not sized at all. So this would be how the mediums would react to our regular books, and so that should be a comfort to most of us because that's what we're used to. Okay, we got one more thing here to test out. Let's find one other watercolor items in my stash and we'll finish off this page. Okay, for the last one we are going to do this Derwent pan set. Now, one thing I wish Derwent would do is actually label these for what they are, because I've had this for a while and I'm actually not sure if this is Derwent Inktense, if this is Derwent paint. It's kind of hard to tell. I do think that this is Inktense, but that I got before I actually got the pencils, but I'm not 100% sure, and it would be nice if they had included at least a swatch card with this so that you knew what it was. But regardless, let's go ahead and I think it's a paint. Because it kind of activates like paint, not Inktense. So and it does max. So if I use quite a bit of water, it is traveling more. Not sure what color this is. Okay, it's a purple. Okay, that does look pretty though. Okay, so this page is done, but there's actually one more set of watercolor pencils that I want to try, and they are my Faber-Castell Albert Durr watercolor pencils. I have the 60 set, and so I thought I would just come over here to this page, which is another of the testing pages, and color one of these balloons here. I'm going to bring in a few colors. So this is Delft blue, again putting it on lightly. I'm not scrubbing into the paper. This is mauve, and this is purple violet. Actually, I'm going to put the lighter color down below. This is light cad yellow. I'm going to jump up another color. This is dark cad yellow. Don't need to be super neat. And this is cad orange. Okay. Okay, so let's activate this. And because I've got multiple colors in here, I am going to make sure my brush is clean. And I'm going to activate all the similar colors at once before I blend up and activate the next color. And you notice how I was pretty sketchy and not filling in everything. That's because watercolor pencils dissolve and the pigment intensifies and moves around. So that worked really well. Okay, let's do this color. Now I'm gonna see if this is going to move and merge. If it does, then what that tells me is that I need to typically wait until one area is dry, because wet on wet will typically blend with each other, and that isn't always what we want. That looks really pretty. Just wiping off my paintbrush in between colors if I don't want them to blend. It is not taking much to activate these, so you just need minimal water, which is great. Okay, so those were the Albert Durr watercolor pencils. Okay, just to make sure I'm being relatively fair to the paper and to this book, instead of using a water brush like this, I'm going to use a watercolor paintbrush. So this is a number 4 Holbein paintbrush, and I'm going to use some actual watercolor, but they're liquid watercolors. So this would be the refills actually for the Ecoline brush pens, and I'm just going to grab a few of those, and I'm going to just dip right in to the paint itself and paint directly onto the paper. Zoom back in again. Just want to see if the paper pills as much with a softer paintbrush than before. So I've got a palette and just some plain water to see if I can move this. Once it's kind of dry, it's not moving a lot. So like I said, that does indicate that there isn't a lot of sizing on this, because watercolor should reactivate and move. So there seems to be a little less pilling of the paper. And this is supposed to be orange. I would say that this brush is working a little bit better than the water brush itself. So definitely it's easier and softer on the paper, for sure. And if you can't mix on your page itself, then mixing on your palette is where your mixing should happen. So that's working there. I do like the way the pencils activated on the paper and moved. I definitely got the paper a lot wetter here, and it has not pilled as badly, so that is encouraging. Okay, so a few final thoughts. One is the softer paintbrush that is actually a watercolor paintbrush does seem to agitate the paper less than the nylon bristle paintbrush that you use for the watercolor, and I think that makes sense. This is scrubbing the paper a little bit harder than your nylon brush would, or your synthetic hair brush would. So I think I will try to use my water brush a little bit more. I was very happy with the watercolors themselves. I really enjoyed using the water pencils though, so the Neocolor 2, the Inktense, and the Graphitant and Staedtler, which are great because I am more comfortable with pencil crayons, colored pencils. So I was a little disappointed in the water brushes. The Zig probably worked the best. Ecoline, the Karen marker, and the Ziggable brush maybe take a bit more finesse and a bit more work. I think that the brushables are very light and they're good for basing, which is kind of nice. The Karen have a lot of juice, so they're not great for basing as so far. So I'm still trying to figure out the perfect spot for those. The Ecoline, again, I'm still working on getting control over them. So while I don't enjoy these three the best on this paper, I do think that they probably have a use somewhere in my arsenal. I just haven't found the right book yet for them. But I do plan on using the Neocolor 2. They dissolved really well, as did the Albert Durr watercolor pencils. And the watercolor itself that did seem to move the most, which makes sense. And yeah, so happy that I did this. I'm really glad that these kind of books do provide these areas at the beginning of the book so that you can try out your different mediums, because not all mediums are going to work in all books exactly the same. And the way I apply the mediums versus the way you apply them, or the tools that you're using, the amount of water that you're using, all will change how those products work. And so I do recommend that you test out your products before you jump in, and there are a number of pages on here at the beginning to do that. So I do have like 1, 2, 3, 4 more pages worth of little things. So every time I have a new, maybe even a color choice that I want to test out to see if I've got some good blends, I can test them out on these beginning pages as well before jumping into my actual picture. I will go and start coloring one of these, but I'll do that on my own time. I just wanted to bring you along for my first foray into this new book. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a creative and colorful week. Let me know down in the comments below if you have this book, what mediums you have been using in it with success, and I look forward to showing you a completed page later in March's completed pages video. All right, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.